Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Greatness Glory podcast. Today, I am going to have a follow-up session in continuation of our last podcast, which was about the three selves or three states of being, three states of mind or consciousness. And I have here today my friend Kevin, and we're going to do a question and answer session and get into the details of the last topic. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Isaac. Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this session because I have so many questions.
All right. What?
I think it was last week that you had a podcast and you'd made the chart doing sort of a comparative analysis of different traditions that you know of. I was going to ask you what made you interested in all these traditions. And you may say some of them are actual religions. And I'd never even heard of some of them.
So I've always been a spiritual seeker, seeking for meaning and where we come from and those kind of stuff. So I searched and studied many traditions. Some of them just a little bit, some of them very deeply. And one of my goals is to give people this awareness that all spiritual traditions and religions, they speak about the same thing in their core. And because there's a lot of misinformation and low quality information, I like to provide high quality information with evidence like this to show that most, if not all of the spiritual traditions and religions, they talk about the same thing. And if we come to conclusion and understanding that they are all talking about the same thing, and it doesn't matter what religion you follow really, because the majority of people, especially followers of like Abrahamic religions, their belief is only my religion is true and all those kind of stuff that we went over it. So as I said, I studied some of these traditions deeply, and some others I just did some research and put these three important concepts about like the structure of, let's say, human beings together to show this unity and let's say map of human awareness.
Thank you. And why do we focus so much on differences as opposed to similarities? I like your approach because I think less people focus on similarities and we're like, no, my God is better than yours or my faith.
It's just like the nature of human mind. We like to compare everything with another thing and then say that this is better, this is the best thing. It's like most people, almost everybody is like that. But then when people's misunderstandings happen around these concepts, and then certain, let's say, destructive beliefs based on illusions and misaligned, misguided religious teachings by corrupt religious leaders and such comes to the story, then people lose touch with reality and they just live in their illusory world of their own beliefs and their own mental world, thinking that now they know the truth, but all they know is actually secondhand information and adopted beliefs from others. It's not the reality. But spirituality, especially at like intermediate to higher levels, is all about experience and finding the truth for yourself by deep introspection, reasoning, and above all, direct experience.
Thank you. And why is that some are called traditions versus others that we believe are religions?
There are many terms people use, and even the same word, different people mean different things when they use it. So the words, I guess, doesn't matter much, and the meaning of religion for some people is very different compared to to other people. Like, for example, for a very large number of the world's population, when you refer to religion, all they can think is Abrahamic religions like Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And even though majority of them, maybe over 90% of people don't have even very little useful information even about those religions. Worse than that, people think, oh, now we know what is religion, based on having a public, image of understanding of those famous religions. But there are countless religions, we can say, and sub traditions, sub religions of those religions, and not all of them have the pure teachings, we can say, but most of them are authentic. Only, as we discussed before, some of them kind of are modified or misrepresented and things like that. So the word doesn't matter. It's important that we clear what we mean when we say religion and spiritual tradition. That's why I always like when somebody asks me something. A lot of time I ask them, can you define what you mean by that? What do you mean by religion? What do you mean by God?
Hmm.
Then we can make sure we are on the same page. Yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, do most religions start in terms of a philosophy, or can we say the two are not necessarily go hand in hand?
I think they are intertwined, and the religion, we can say, mostly it should be at least a method, and it's usually like a message to people that this is the nature of life, and this is the path to freedom and evolution, very briefly, if you want to put it.
You know what I find fascinating is the agnostic population, which I understand as those who say it doesn't matter if there's a God or not. um, how does that work in your opinion? Like, do the agnostic not care, or do they still seek and say it doesn't matter?
Well, in my personal opinion, first of all, agnostic says we don't know if there is a God or not, right? And then atheists say, no, we are sure there is no God. And having that atheist belief is fundamentally wrong, because you assume that, and this is going to take some time to explain, but if I want to keep it short, you assume that you know everything when you say, I know there is no God. Imagine for something like just a human body. There are like hundreds of different types of doctors over a few thousand years of history of medicine and so on. We have billions of pages of data about the human body, and still I believe we don't understand 1% of the human body. But the atheist assumes that they know not only this in some way, this life, they also know everything in the universe. And then they can say, oh, there's no God. And if the atheist says that I don't believe in that version of God that most religions, like Abrahamic religions talk about, I don't blame them, because I also don't believe in that. But if you say, okay, there is no, you know, there is no source for the universe, there is no intelligence in the universe, and this is gonna be like a long subject again. I cannot get into it now, but then it's fundamentally wrong to assume that now, yeah, I know what is for sure. And then you're talking about like being agnostic and so on. It's much better to be an agnostic, and it's actually in some ways very spiritual, because you're saying I don't know. But when you say I don't know, are you trying to find out if there is something, or there is a transcendental nature or meaning to life, or something beyond this material life? No, most people, also most agnostic also, they either don't even search for it, maybe they just study a couple of books and then they say, okay, we don't know, let's just live our lives. But the most intelligent person, or intelligent is a kind of vague term also in these days, but the most aware person, or let's say the person who is mostly connected to his or her intuition, if you just do a basic reasoning, you should come to this understanding that this is a temporary life, and this is a very unstable life. This body is very unstable. It can get sick, it can die, and it will die for sure. This life, 50 years or 100 years, if we live or whatever, I don't think the point of we being here is just to suffer or have pleasures and so on. There should be a meaning behind it. So the person who starts seeking the answers, we can call him a spiritual seeker. And it makes sense to have those questions. But the problem is that most people come to conclusions fast and say, oh, now we found the answer. There is no God, there is no spirituality, there is no soul, metaphysics, and so on. But for the person with an open mind, there is millions of reasons to understand that there is something beyond this transitional temporary material reality.
Yeah, I sort of agree, because it could be a form of spirituality if you just say we just don't know. And the question is, and these are the thoughts that kept me out of the good schools, why does it even matter? Like, why does it matter if I'm agnostic or believe in something? Because if it's truly, as Hinduism sort of explains it, these are just cycles, are natural cycles, and we are like just sort of in and out of our self-created realities or whatnot. Why does it even matter ultimately what
I
I
think
believe in?
it's very, very obvious and clear why it matters, because let's say you are in a jail, and let's say you were born in a jail, like that Batman movie. This person was born in that jail underground. Some people that watch that movie know. And you were raised in the jail, and you have no idea what's outside. And then you decide, oh, let's just have fun in the jail and try to make it more pleasant as much as we can, and just don't try to get out of it. Because this life, this reality that we are living in a way, it's a jail. It's a jail of knowing and awareness. And well, all the spiritual traditions, like Hinduism, Buddhism, and all the esoteric part of Abrahamic religions and so on, they're saying that there is a reality beyond this, which is absolute freedom. And that reality is not somewhere else. Just like Jesus said, the kingdom of God is within you. It's within you, it's you, and you can experience it. So most people, they just either dismiss that idea, or they just go read a couple of books or do something half-heartedly, and they say, okay, let's just try to survive the life till we die. Why bother seeking truth and so on? But if you are really honest with yourself, naturally you go and find answers about the source of life and nature of life and those kind of things. And I was recently thinking about this, the religions that, and this is not originally from the prophets or the enlightened beings of those religions. Also, the part of those religions or religious leaders or whatever that created that created the idea of afterlife in terms of going to heaven, they have done the biggest damage to spirituality and to freedom and to higher consciousness. Because for most people, if they didn't just, made themselves satisfied with just a belief that, oh, okay, I'm just gonna live this life and do these rituals and follow these scriptures, and when I die, I will meet God and go to heaven. If they didn't believe in that idea, they would naturally think that only in this life I can find the truth and become free. But that belief of going to heaven and experiencing freedom in heaven has done the biggest damage to people, because it kind of keeps you stuck. You say, that's all to life. Let's just do our prayers and be a good person. When we die, we'll go and meet God and we go to heaven. And I think if there wasn't such a belief, a lot of people would actually start seeking the answers internally and in experience in this lifetime instead of just having a belief that it will happen sometime later.
In that case, why did you call this to be a quote unquote prison?
Why they call it to be prison? Isn't it a prison? Because like this life is very fragile life, right? You know, one virus can kill you in 1 second. And there is a lot of physical and psychological things that can cause you suffering. Only when you're having a good life and everything is pleasant, mostly you think where I am is perfect. That's why a lot of people become spiritual seekers and go after, you know, seeking awakening and whatever when their suffering, you know, increases. And that's sad because we should be wiser and seek the truth while we are healthy and we are in a better place rather than waiting till life or our karma or whatever crushes us, then
Mhm.
we hit the rock bottom and then we start seeking for the answers. Just think about it. There's nothing at the end of this life. This body will die, this personality, everything will disappear. Only if there is something within you, which is the deepest aspect of you, living through this body here, if you really experience and find that, it can give you the answers, you know, not just believing that, oh, I'm gonna just go to another world and I'll find the answer, or just assuming, okay, that's all there is to life, let's just try to, you know, tiptoeing through life till it finishes and then everything ends. These are all limiting beliefs in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're basically saying the nature of this reality is that we are confined by the physical body, hence it feels like a prison. But the reason we want to seek and ask questions and need the spirituality is to basically find our way out. But you also mentioned like a lot of religions, created these issues, basically promising a better life, 72 virgins. If you do this or that, or if you do, such and such, you're a good person or a bad person, which is in reality is an incorrect notion. I'm not saying there's no good or bad, um, that there's no evil. But I'm saying, why do we believe this is a prison? Because that's what specifically Abrahamic religions did, creating all these issues and wars. Whereas the true nature of spirituality, in my opinion, just like the Christ consciousness, teaches about everybody and everything being one. So we're all being born together and we all die together. And it's just that notion of the one is good versus the other that creates those issues. So how do we, you know, remain neutral, agnostic even, but enjoy life, enjoy peace?
I mean, how what is the relationship between remaining neutral and then enjoying life in your mind?
Um, because as of recently, I've been thinking like being agnostic could be a form of spirituality, like you said. It's very interesting because I didn't even mention, and you mentioned it's a form of spirituality. Basically saying,
Yeah, as I said, if you're agnostic and then you're seeking the answer, not to say, "Oh, we don't know," whatever. That's not a spirituality.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, good, great point. Yes. No, saying I don't know, right? Because, like, I mean, the depth of a spirituality is really truly realizing how insignificant we are, at the same time realizing how great we are. But the truth is, we really don't know. So there is nothing wrong with being at with everything, with the universe, trees, animals, and just saying, wow, we just have no freaking clue. To me, that's a form of spirituality. Maybe it's not being agnostic, but how do we separate from this notion that this religions created? How about that?
Uh, if I understood you correctly, like you're saying, how do we separate from that notion of like religious creator, the version of God that, you know, some religions explained? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like when like you look into every major religion and you find the true people who've been seeking, they have arrived at one conclusion, that we are all one. But on the surface, these religions, faiths, and belief systems create a lot of conflict. How do we transition, you know, from that to that?
Uh, this is something we already touched in multiple episodes. So the key is to not come to conclusions, not to think that you know, not to think that you have the answers, no matter what religion told you that or what religious authority told you that. What is wrong with studying 10 religions? Why don't you go and study 10 religions? Because if you go and study many religions and cross-reference and think and contemplate, then you become more aware about the core meaning. You know why some religious leaders create fear in you? They say, oh, it's really bad, don't go study about that religion or whatever. That reminds me of something funny. I used to go to the church when I was a teenager, and I had some of this, like, kind of, a rosary Hindu type of bracelet. It was really a gemstone, it wasn't even a Hindu thing, at my wrist. And this pastor that I usually talk to saw me and said, like, are you going to some of these, cults or something? It was like, his reaction was funny. He was like, yeah, he wanted to make sure that I'm not studying something else, or I'm not going somewhere else that could, like, disconnect me from Jesus or God or something. And that's how, at least all of the Abrahamic religions have that mindset, that, oh, God is going to punish you if you go and study about this and that, and this is wrong, that is wrong, that's gonna put you in the hell if you go and do this. And if you question God, if you question the religious teachings and so on. And that's the biggest issue here, because, like, we got to understand that those things, your opinion, and if you research, if you study wisely, you'll see they don't come from God. They come from some, misrepresented religious teachings. And I wanted to say, actually, we were going to talk about the previous episode of the three selves. So if you want to switch a little bit to those questions, because you originally said you wanted to discuss some questions about that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, this is why I felt doing comparative cosmology, like that chart you made, which I don't know if you want to share or not. It was in your last episode, is important because you're saying, hey, look at the similarities. Don't be afraid of looking into other traditions. I know with my own personal experience, I have family, Orthodox Jewish family members who don't talk to me because I openly talked about Hinduism and chakras and energy systems. And they're like, oh, those systems are not kosher. You cannot look into them. But I'm like, well, what if Judaism also talked about the same things, but in a different way? The thing with the topics you often teach about Isaac, which is also reflected in your amazing book, The Art of Balance. And I love how you sort of bring everything together in your book based on the concept of Trinity, balance with the mind, body, and soul. And you argue what it takes to have a well balanced life, which is a very relevant topic nowadays for people who want peace. It's the comparative analysis that you've done that sort of has had me, thinking we need to talk more about similarities, like whether we agree, we really don't know, or we think we do. Is the similarities that's going to bring humanity together. And can you please share, like, why you organized the chart like that, like what inspired you to illustrate it like that based on your understanding?
As I said, I used many traditions just to show the fact that almost all spiritual traditions and correct version of religions, they're talking about the same thing. And especially in Judaism and Islam, for example, the spiritual part of Judaism and Islam is not in the religion that people follow. If you understand, it's in the esoteric part of it. And for example, let me give you example of Islam, for example. According to the Sufism and Sufis, there are four stages, and one is Shariat, or Sharia, which is just a set of rules for living your life, and whether those rules were given by prophet or whatever people believe, it doesn't matter. But that's not even about spiritual, realization. It's about, just making sure that you don't harm somebody, hopefully, and such things. And then the second stage Sufis believe is tariqat, which means the path. The path to what? To marifat, which is the third one. What is marifat? Realization. So you just, from the first stage, you're just trying to have a balanced life, let's say. I don't believe the Shariat or the halakha in Judaism that is practiced today, it's anything like whatever it was in original form, first of all. But it's, the point used to be, okay, I don't know, don't eat pork because it's probably, for whatever reason, spiritually and psychologically and even maybe health wise, is not good for you, for example. And even I talk about certain universal rules about diet in Art of Balance book, right? So those are foundation, those are not realization, higher truth, or anything. So when you just live by that basic thing, shariat and whatever, and then you walk through the path, tariqat, then when you walk through the path, which means you are doing a spiritual practices deeply, and you find realization or marifat, and through the realization of what the ultimate state is, haqiqat, which is the truth. It's a very beautiful way of explaining actually the spirituality, these four stages. So let's say it like this: live a balanced life, be sensible, and walk through a spiritual path and achieve wisdom and higher awareness and realization, so you can find the truth. So that's the part of even like Islam and Judaism and so on, that is spirituality. The version that is people follow is not a spirituality, where like 95% of people, or whatever the number is, don't really are not really spiritual seekers. As you know, they want to go to heaven, and first you have to die to go to heaven.
Yeah.
Going back to that thing, when I spoke about the three selves, for example, is a foundation for understanding yourself and in some way universe, to understand that you are not your compulsive nature and instincts. Those are a part of you, an aspect of you, but you have a reasoning, conscious self, which you can use to balance and kind of master your compulsions and limitations, and then transcend to your higher self, which is not somewhere on the, in the skies in some way. It's like within you. It's just a subtler, so we call it higher self. And that's why I explained that, and I even included, like, I think it's 13 different traditions that they all are talking about the same thing in some way. And understanding this, concept, philosophy, and there's a ton of other details and cosmology and so on, which I hopefully will go over in the next episodes, help us to understand our life and our purpose of life and those things better, and then move toward that, realization that we talked about and the ultimate truth.
I think in that chart, which I'd never seen anything like it before, you can see the similarities because you broke it down to the very basic element of consciousness. The concept of self, you broke it down to the very core of consciousness, which is what scientists are now saying at the very core of it all, like the universe is alive and conscious. We are consciousness beyond anything else. And that's why I think that chart works. I think you can show the similarities and the overlaps across all those faiths. And I would love to see more of that, because you're looking at it from a perspective of a consciousness, not just, me and you, like an individualistic surface overview of like what is my label versus your label, my God versus your God.
So basically, the most important, uh, you know, point of that presentation was to also mention the higher self. And because my passion is to talk about the spiritual truths and so on based on my understanding and experience, to also make people aware that there is something, at least there are hundreds of religions and spiritual traditions from all around the world that they might not even have known each other, that they all came to conclusion that there is a higher self which is not material body, and it's transcendental, and it's beyond the limitation of body and mind and suffering, and it's a source of your material existence. But if you identify with material existence, which means thinking that you are a dying body, because this body is going to die, let's be honest, or you are a person, and you know the word person, I believe, comes from Greek, from the word persona, which means a mask. And let's say you put a mask on your face and then you stick to it, and you know you act in that mask so strongly that you believe you are the mask. So the personality is kind of like that. We think I am this Isaac born here, and this is what happened in my life, these are my tendencies and likes and dislikes, and this is me. You know, I am a cat person. You are a dog person. I'm a morning person. I like coffee, whatever. So those are our limitations. Those are the things that when we stick to, then we stay limited. People that are spiritual seekers, they have felt that there is something beyond this personality and the body that is always changing. And when you stick to something that is changing, you always suffer. Why? Because when you identify with the body and personality and you're seeking something and you don't get it, you suffer. And when you seeking something and you get it, you still suffer because you have fear of losing it, or it's temporary, because no matter what you achieve anyways, you're gonna lose it at the end of the body. So when people think about things like death or these spiritual concepts, a lot of people for themselves, they really come to a better understanding and conclusion that, oh, I gotta start seeking for the truth. You know, only when you are so identified deeply with the body and this person that you are kind of being controlled by these illusions and think that there is nothing higher than this, and you are so much involved in the play of body and mind and hormones that you don't even get a space to search for truth and find the space of absolute freedom within you, which you can experience and become established in, to experience the ultimate freedom and truth, which is already here within you.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm still like thinking in my head about being agnostic and still a seeker. I think that's a very interesting notion that you could arrive at that conclusion, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the point was that I always talk about this. I have mentioned this many places. I even like to write a book on this subject because this is the most fundamental necessity for finding truth about anything, actually, not only about universe or whatever. That you shouldn't really think that you know anything. Anything that you know, you should just loosely hold on to it, not thinking this is the highest answer, because there can always be a higher truth. And as long as you don't stick to your beliefs and opinions and things like that and say, I strongly believe this is the truth, you know, that's why, you know, people come up with foolish, justification even for most stupid things, and that's sad. For example, one time I was talking to a Jewish friend, talking about this thing that was very, very logical to think that a religion that was created a few thousand years ago, some of its teaching could have been modified or manipulated and so on. But people who have blind faith, they can't even question that. In the Torah, for example, there are 613 or whatever commandments, and you would think that these commandments, if you don't know about them, okay, they should be about how to live a good life, how to be respectful, loving, how to be healthy, how to help others, how to evolve, and all those kind of things, and health and so on. And I was talking to this friend, and I mentioned, don't laugh, whatever, whoever you are listening to this, don't laugh, because it's true, actually. I was talking about this commandment that says, apparently God said that if you catch someone penetrating a cow, having sex with a cow, catch the cow and the guy who is having sex with the cow, and stone both of them to death. First of
This is
all,
in
I
the
don't
Old
know.
Testament.
Right. First of all, I don't know, between all the things that God would say, why would God say that thing? There are millions of other things that are more important, and why would you even talk about that? Secondly, I don't know what is the poor cow's fault that needs to be stoned to death. So I was saying that people with blind faith, instead of thinking, oh, maybe this is modified, maybe some idiot wrote some of these things 1,000 years ago, or maybe at some point there were a lot of people with sexual perversions getting turned on by the cows.
Yeah.
So it says, like, no, God said it. And then I said, why would God say that? Imagine you say God is compassionate, and God is the highest compassion and love, and God is like, mother, a father, and all those things. If I say I did such a thing, and then my dad caught me, would my dad try to give me some advice and like make me understand this is not a good thing or whatever? Or would my dad says, okay, we need to kill you and the cow? Just like Jesus said, if a human person with all of his limitations and faults wouldn't do that, why would God, that you claim, a lot of religious people, and that is compassionate, the most fundamental thing, for example, in Islam, when they want to say anything, start anything, they say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of the most compassionate God. Or Christians say God is love, and all those things. So there is a paradox. Why would God say kill, and I'm really abusing myself getting much into this topic, but let's conclude. So this person was like, I said, why would God say this? He was like, because this person, by doing that, made himself impure. So I was like, that's why God said that. When you don't think, and when you just have blind faith, you just come up with something to make yourself feel good about the beliefs. And for example, Sadhguru talks a lot about this. I really love it. He says, if your intelligence is not affected, manipulated by blind beliefs and so on, if you do something stupid, your conscience will bother you. If today you did something, you even killed an animal or a human being or whatever, your intelligence, your conscience will bother you. But if you put God's name on that act and say, okay, God said do it, you could do the most stupid thing and not feel bad about it, and then you would find any stupid reason to just justify and say, no, it's a good thing, God said it. So I think we got so much, we got distracted from the main
No,
topic.
actually, but I think it's a very important topic, because if you recall, we had another episode where I ask you why faith has to be blind, right? Like why can't we make decisions consciously like a child who makes a mistake, and the father is there not to just discipline but also guide. And this notion of impurity and other meanings we've created, it gets so dangerous, especially when you have adults who believe, you know, everything is a word of God and that my God is, you know, better than your God. We have this situation in our hands where more people have died in the name of God than anything else. And it's really scary that in 2025, you know, we still on the daily basis hear of hate crimes, shootings in the States. Schools are not safe, unfortunately, you know.
You know, let's say something that is useful to people. You know, I see a lot of these videos, and I know you love crows and ravens. I see like they would give a something totally new to, let's say, a crow or many, almost all animals, and this animal is trying to figure it out, like trying to solve that puzzle to find the food and so on. So let's say an animal in terms of intellectual capabilities and so on is much lower than human beings, they say. If that animal, which animals are acting, you know, in alignment with the God's law or with the universe, only humans mostly are perverted from the truth. So if the animal or even a baby, they have like extreme curiosity to figure things out, they just investigate it, play with it to see what it is. And that's why that intellect, in some way, curiosity was given to us. Just like many other things, you know, if you were given, you know, mouth was to eat or sexual organs to reproduce or whatever, everything has a purpose. So we cannot say that, you know, God gave us the intellect, which is a tool for exploration and, you know, learning, and said don't use it. This is the biggest, you know, paradox in some of these, you know, modern version of Abrahamic religions, because they mostly say don't use your intellect to find the answers, just you know, follow my answers, just accept what I'm saying. The rabbi, the mullah, whatever says, that's the truth. Don't use your intellect. If the animal or a 1-year-old baby has the intelligence, and that's probably why Jesus said the kingdom of heaven belongs to the children, learn from the children. If they have that intellect to figure things out, why would you, when you come to some teachings, which, if you really think about it, without allowing the beliefs to kind of disturb your intelligence, why don't you also question and try to find answers? Because again, why would God give us intellect and such a powerful ability, you know, and the example of it are like such a brilliant people, at least materially speaking, like Einstein or Nikola Tesla and whatever, and they were all great thinkers. Why would God give us intellect and say, oh, don't use it to question things? It doesn't make sense. God doesn't have any issue, in my opinion, with you questioning even God, because God wants you to find the truth, not to just become happy with the belief. I wish it was that easy that I could say, you know, guys, God is a kind of being sitting there and he looks like this, and just call on him and believe in him and everything is taken care of and you'll go to heaven. And then you say, oh, all right, I'm just gonna adopt that belief, everything is done, I don't need to think anymore, I don't need to find truth. This is the exact opposite of spirituality, because spirituality is all about seeking, constantly seeking, and not stopping till you get the answer in a format that is a living experience, not an intellectual answer. That's why you cannot find the spiritual answers in any scripture or in a book. They all point to the attitude, the approach, or the methods, techniques, meditation and whatever else, for you to go where the truth is, which is within yourself. So I think that covers that.
Thank you. And the question that comes up for me, you mentioned, a loving father would guide their child. Why in the story of creation, when Eve is tempted by the idea of wisdom, right? She's punished, and Adam is punished for eating from the fruit of knowledge. Wouldn't a loving father want their kids to be wise and tap into the all-knowing consciousness of the Creator?
A lot of things in especially Judaism, especially in the book of Genesis, is encrypted spiritual esoteric concepts. And that's why I use this many times, that Rumi said, I took the core from the Quran and left the skin for the donkeys or the fools. That's because for whatever reason, some of the concepts were encrypted, embedded in the religious text. But that story, it doesn't mean that there was a person and this happened and so on. That's why I'm not saying this is true, but there are a lot of people and a lot of strong evidence that they say many of these biblical characters, they didn't even exist or things like that. I don't believe in that, or I don't disbelieve it also, but that's also good to consider that those stories might not mean what you think. Maybe there's a deeper spiritual message within them. I mean, not all religions are like that. Some of them, they talk in terms of more direct explanation of the truth. And I think every age is different also. Sometime maybe 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, for whatever reason, they could have explained it in kind of mystical way that it needs to be decrypted by people who are aware to understand its meaning. But you're mentioning um, achieving the power of discrimination and that knowledge and so on, that being in heaven, in the Eden, the Garden of Eden, and being in presence of God, it is talking about the experience of oneness and unity, and being one with God. And then the tree of knowledge, actually knowledge here, I believe, is a misleading word also, because this is not a type of knowledge that we say achieve like a spiritual wisdom and knowledge, becoming enlightened. This means intellectual comparison, comparative mind that creates me and you, creates duality, and all of our disconnect from truth, or whatever you call it, God or whatever. It's because of our mind. And if there is no duality in our mind, which is the purpose of spirituality, and specifically some of the traditions that almost scientifically talk about this and explain it are Vedanta, Buddhism, and so on, yoga especially, that if you remove that duality, you will achieve that self-realization and the oneness with God. Also, Sufism talks a lot about this overcoming duality. Even talking about Islam, the famous phrase "La ilaha illallah," which I kind of mentioned once also before. It's not talking about, okay, there is this God and that God and that God, and only this God is true. It's saying actually there is nothing but God. That's why Sufis have a statement in Arabic. It says Yaman Laisa Allahu, which means there is nothing but God. Everything is God. But then again, confusion happens that people think, what do you mean there is nothing? So there is a guy, his name is Allah, he looks like this or something, sitting somewhere, and there is nothing but him. That's a wrong way of understanding deeper spiritual meanings. But Allah or God or whatever, Shiva, Brahman, here doesn't mean an entity. It means the whole universal intelligence, which contains the whole universe, the whole energy manifestation of universe, and it contains us also, and it's the deepest aspect of us. And if we see that with our spiritual eye, and that's funny, I talked about spiritual eye. You know why we have two eyes? Because we are living in duality. Why not one eye, for example? These two eyes only show us duality. And you know why in almost all spiritual traditions they talk about the third eye, or eye of knowledge, eye of Horus, eye of Ra, and those kind of things? It's because this eye, which is not necessarily something that is in your pineal gland, it is a state of seeing everything as one, seeing the unity of all things. And to make it more practical, as long as you think there is me versus the world, there is a me and there is a world and I'm separate, then you are limited and there is suffering. But if everything is a part of yourself, there is no suffering, because the reason for suffering is that, just look at it deeply, think about it for a few minutes after the podcast. You think, okay, I am here, something is happening to me. Why are you doing this to me, God? Kevin, why are you doing this to me? All those things. And then because of that, you suffer because you think something is happening to you. But if you realize, oh, everything is actually you in some way, which is, we can't explain it, let's be honest. It's not
Yeah.
something that can be explained. It's an experience that unless you experience it, even if you read 1 trillion scriptures, you still won't get it and you will be more confused. So it's an experience, it's a state that needs to be experienced only by the person.
Thank you. I think we truly, the only thing we know is how much we don't know. And it makes me wonder what percentage of the people who subscribe to those faith and traditions, including us, really truly understand the core of the teachings. And when you mentioned sort of things have changed over centuries, like just a game of telephone that you play, messages change over time, like changing just a few hands. Imagine how much distortion we have experienced with the religions that we right now today believe is modern Judaism, let's say. I recently was privileged enough to find an amazing Kabbalist, and I've been studying with him, and I can testify that you're 100% correct. I had no idea how much of the Old Testament is truly allegories and symbolism, and basically even names specifically, without getting into too much detail, names of God, sacred names of God, and names of famous rabbis who wrote the Zohar and wrote the Torah, or not write the Torah, but contribute to it. All allegories referring to different attributes of Judaism, and I would love to discuss in the future episodes the similarities between Judaism and Hinduism, if you should be open to it. I understand that there was a book published on this a while back, Letters of a Rabbi to a Buddhist Monk, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I'll research it more and would love to ask you some questions about those similarities specifically.
Okay. Any other thing that you want to discuss?
Yeah, how do we remind ourselves that we just simply don't know?
Let's be honest with ourselves. And if you look deeply, you know that you don't know.
Right.
Because let's end by saying this. If you're, let's say you have a cup full of coffee or something, and then you want to get some water. First, you have to throw away the coffee to create a emptiness and vacuum to fill it with something. So whenever you think that I know, I'm not even talking about knowing or not knowing. I'm talking about thinking that you know. Whenever you think you know and you're very sure that you know, you're like that cup of coffee. There is no hope for you to find the answer, even if it's the highest truth, because you close your doors. your cup is already filled. And there is a famous Zen story actually that maybe a lot of people know, that this person goes to this Zen master, and there's a lot of stories actually in with the same theme in spiritual traditions. And this guy says, "Oh, master, I have come here to learn about this truth. I studied, I'm saying my version of it. I studied Vedanta and Sufism and so on, and then I know that the truth about the three selves and the concept of God, and God is like this, and I experienced this thing, and I know that this chakra color is like that, and I need to awaken my kundalini and all those things, and I want to get to a higher level and all those things." And then this master brings this teapot and puts this cup in front of him, and this guy is still like talking, and the master is pouring the tea in the cup, and the cup overfills, and it makes a mess on the table. And the guy is still talking. He says, the cup is full, master." And the master says, "And your mind is also full. Go away. I cannot teach you anything, because you need to empty your cup before I can pour anything into your mind. So that's what we need to do. We need to empty our mind and let it go." You know, the famous Bruce Lee video that says like, "Empty your mind,
Now,
become
I
full."
finally want to say I get that, but it begs the question, is being agnostic the destination or just the beginning?
Of course, it's just the beginning.
But at the very end, then there is like, we don't know. You mentioned you could
At
read
the
all
end,
scripture. Hmm?
let's be clear. Let's be clear. A spiritual experience, and at the end that you call it, or realization and so on, it has nothing to do with mind and information and knowledge in the form that we're talking about. In some way, even you lose everything that you know, you lose everything material at the end of this body. Also at the end of this spiritual seeking, actually you lose everything, and that losing everything means that you become everything, and you don't become even everything, you're already everything. But by losing everything that you think you are, and you know, you will find the existential real truth, and see that actually you are everything. Everything is within you. And let's end by saying this poem from the great Guru Rumi, that says, in Farsi it goes like this: حاصل عمرم سه سخن بیش نیست خام بودم پخته شدم سوختم. It's very beautiful. It says, a product of my life, the whole conclusion of my life is nothing more than this: I was naive, then I became more experienced. He puts it like this: I was naive, or I was raw. Let's use it literally the way that he uses the word. I was raw. Then I was cooked, and then I was burnt. So first I was really naive. Maybe I was a religious believer or something with blind faith. Then I learned the spiritual things, and I became experienced, and I memorized 1 million scriptures, and I achieved spiritual experiences. But at the end, I realized that these were all some means to get somewhere, which is a place of no place beyond time and space. And then I lost everything. And that losing everything is actually the highest thing. And this is a paradox for people who have not studied spirituality and, you know, things like Zen, Sufism, and yoga and so on. But that's the highest thing, actually, to become free of everything that you are. So again, the ultimate thing is not even a knowing mentally. It's like a experience. Is beyond mind. It's more like a state of being, an experience, and, you know, like a feeling, but again, feeling is also not the right word to use it, because feeling is related to, body and so on. So it's just a state of being. And as hard as I want to explain it, there's no way to explain it.
Yeah. So if you want to bless somebody, you could say, may you lose it all, right?
Depends if you mean it in a spiritual way.
With a good intention. May you lose it all, including the mask, the persona, right? And then find yourself in nothingness. Wouldn't that be the biggest blessing?
All right, Kevin. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank
Have a
you. And
great
may
time.
we all lose it all, huh? And find ourselves again.
Yeah.
Thank you, Isaac. Thank you.